Hi, my name's Nick Best. I'm Managing Director here at Astranti, and I've also recorded 10 hours worth of video for you to guide you towards passing your management case study exam. And this is just one sample, and this particular sample focuses on the role that you must take. Basically, in the exam, CIMA set out for us a document which says this is the role you play, this is your level, this is what's expected of you. And the examiner has said time and time again, since this original document came out, you must be playing your role. And those people that play their role tend to do better in the exams. It's interesting, actually. I was just recording some videos for the strategic case study, and it's exactly the same in the strategic case study. It's a slightly different role there. It's a more strategic role there. But the examiner's very, very much after the role. And what that strategic examiner said was that people would only tend to get into their role by the second or third questions. And so the first question was often less good. It was often more like an exam answer rather than the focus on you playing that role and being the person you're supposed to be, like you're working in that business. Okay, so this video as a whole will tell you what that role is and how to play that role. And this is just a short sample from that, out of which I hope that you'll get some useful information for you to take you towards passing your management case study exam. That's the big picture then. Big picture, finance manager, some E's, some F's, some P's. It's about medium-term decision making. In more detail then. Firstly, your role as the finance manager then is to be a managerial type of role, making decisions. As such, you must act as a good, confident manager. When you're writing your report, quite often what I see is people kind of sitting on the fence and saying, well, maybe it could be this, maybe it could be that. We could do this, we could do that. Now, in actual fact, it's okay to say we could do this, we could do that. But what you, having done the advantages and disadvantages of both the coulds, you must confidently say, but my recommendation is we will do this. You are a manager making managerial decisions, and you must come across confidently. Remember, one of the elements of your role is to be able to persuade and to convince. Some people have problems writing scripts in that way. They're kind of very, very wishy-washy. But remember, there's a significant number of leadership skills here. You need to show you have that leadership potential. Confidence then comes into it. Next is the medium-term perspective. I would say medium-term, about a year. You'll be making decisions that will affect the next 6 months to a year. That's the goal. And the exam should typically be setting you tasks that would be things like, well, should we invest in that new product or project or not? Should we be investing in that new marketing campaign? These are the kind of medium-term decisions, as opposed to what you'd be doing at strategic level, which would be, should we buy that business or not? Should we go into a new business area? Okay, so that's the overriding focus. That probably won't have an impact in the exam, with the exception of just that would be the nature of the type of questions that tend to come up. You then are on this middle position. You take the strategy set to you by the directors. Now, what that means is that your recommendation should be consistent with that strategy. That means that the kind of E2 strategy stuff that you've done does come into this, because your decisions need to be consistent with the business's direction, with the business's goals. You won't be asked to make strategic decisions, but you will be asked to make a lower level decision which is consistent. This is where the pre-scene analysis comes in. In your pre-scene analysis, you must have done a full strategic analysis to understand the business and its position and its goals, so that the lower level decisions you're making are consistent with that. Typically then, the operational level at the bottom is you'll then take those decisions that are made and pass it on to someone else to do them. Maybe it's someone in your finance team if it's some costing analysis, or maybe within the business if you've helped make a decision on which new products to produce. Off that goes down to the production department to go off and make it. So that's where you're sitting, in this middle level role. You are the link between the strategy and the operations. So that's a starting point. Some more specifics then. You are implementing strategy. Actually, this is that's the kind of overriding point that links in with the being in that management position. You're taking the strategic decisions made above, putting those into place with some lower level decisions. And you might be making investment decisions about products and prices and long-term assets and what we buy. Those were the three specific ones mentioned in the role. I would therefore expect the examiners to be picking up on those particular ones more often than others, because it's a guide to what the examiner really wants you to be doing. Costing comes into this. So remember some of your costing techniques, such as activity-based costing, relevant costing, absorption costing, and so on. So you are likely to be given some costing information, and I would link that in from an investing point of view, of course, to particularly relevant costing and then net present value calculations, from which, having been given that data, you should be then making a decision based on that data. Of course, we have our classic positive NPV, means you would go ahead with the project, but perhaps you want to consider where the data's come from, the reliability of that data. Do you know what? Most of those kind of NPV type calculations are simply projections. Well, how accurate are those projections? Those are the kind of broader comments that in a written based answer you're going to be having to write a lot of, because you're not going to be required to do the NPV. It's commenting on that NPV or commenting on those possible different prices and what one is the most relevant one. Okay, so your P1 costing comes into this. So do watch out for that, because of course you may not have studied some of that for a long time. I do expect more of your exam to be the kind of P2 MPVs and that kind of thing, but don't ignore your P1s. Do relate to the scenario and make it suitable. Again, it comes back to our previous slide. Make it suitable to the business's strategy and the business's position. So related to the pre-seen, related to any new information that comes up to the unseen. So you're told that you are focusing on individual and divisional performance. Likelihood is that you're working in a finance manager, a role which is within a finance department. You may have to make decisions about something like how you would go about managing your particular division. It might relate back to something like organisational structure or some of the leadership models and some particular issues that are being faced with staff and how you go about leading, managing and motivating them. Or it could be a decision that's made on behalf of a different division. So you link it back to the costing and the P1, and therefore they go away and implement the new product or the prices and so on. Okay, so I'm going to stop the sample there. The rest of this video went on to explain a lot more about the role and how to play that role effectively. CIMA recently released a script review, and it was a review of a real student script, and actually that forms one of the videos as part of this whole video series. But I just wanted to share one element of that with you before I finish this sample, simply because the examiner set out 3 or 4 keys to passing in his experience. And one of those was bolded. It was the only one that was bolded. And that one was, students must play the role they've been allocated. And I think one of the problems is that when people are writing scripts, they kind of write it like it's an exam. You know, like you've always gone into an exam, haven't you? And you've probably spent like 7 or 8 years of doing exams some point in your life. And you just go in and you kind of answer it as like an independent analysis. But here you've got to jump into the role. You've got to play that role. And what's interesting is that as you looked through that analysis of what the examiner was looking for, he goes through looking at the student's script and saying, and constantly he starts talking about, yeah, but they're not playing the role here. They're not actually analysing this. They're not acting as if they're in the business. They're really showing business knowledge and showing that experience, and they're not doing what they're supposed to be doing in the role that they are playing. It was a constant theme. So actually, hopefully you'll find that particular video useful to you, as well as this one. as well, because in that one the examiner goes through really giving you a lot of detail about what's required and what isn't required in the exam. So that's one of a whole series of videos. We've got around 10 hours worth of video for you in this tuition series, all of which is focused on getting you through this exam. And of course this video is part of a whole course, and there's a whole range of other materials that are available on the whole course. And I hope through watching this sample and the other samples that are available that you'll think that the either the tuition videos or the whole course are worth your while joining. Certainly we are committed here to getting you through the exam, and we do all our best to help you and support you in that process. So whatever you decide to do and whichever way you decide to prepare, I do wish you the best of luck when the exam comes.